This video is brought to you by Describe. Describe is a service for tabletop roleplayers like us who want to enrich our descriptions of places, creatures, spells, and our characters. All descriptions are placed in beautiful box text for easy reading, and the search function allows you to access the description you want when you want it without keeping your table waiting. How do you want to describe your next necromancer? With Describe, it could be the figure carries upon their crooked frame a weight and a weariness that belies their youth. Their hair, prematurely white, hangs limply about their face, shadowed by a low cowl. They carry a gnarled staff of some strange pale wood, though closer inspection reveals it to be carved bone. They keep about their waist a belt ringed with pouches, which emanate an acrid and bitter odor. The figure smells sharply of loam and fresh earth, and something else too, the sickly sweet aroma of decay. Check out the link for Describe in the video description, and don't forget to use the coupon code TreantMonk to get a 10% discount on your initial subscription. Hey Optimancers, Chris here. When we talk about 9th level spells, the conversation always seems to, move to Wish. And, I admit, Wish is an extremely powerful spell. But should you reach those levels where 9th level spells are an option, I don't think Wish is necessarily the automatic selection. For one thing, part of the power of Wish comes through options you might not actually want to use, or even be able to use in actual gameplay. Let me give you an example. Let's say I use a 7th level slot and I create a simulacrum of my character. Then I have the simulacrum cast Wish to create another simulacrum of my character. And then that simulacrum casts Wish to create another simulacrum of my character, and so on. These kinds of infinite loops are naturally extremely powerful, almost of unlimited power. And naturally, they should probably not be permitted to be used in an actual game because they immediately end that game. So, if the loopholes are closed, then how good is Wish? Well, it's still super versatile, and that in itself makes it quite powerful. I generally find that spells that can do a lot of different things when you need them have greater power than those that do one thing extremely well. But at that point, I don't think Wish is so much more powerful than other 9th level spells that there aren't some that are pretty competitive. Today I want to talk about the Shapechange Spell, which is one of those spells I think becomes extremely competitive as one of the best 9th level spell options in the game. Or maybe you're playing a druid, in which case I think Shapechange is probably the most powerful spell option available to you. If you would like to support this content, please check the link in the video description for my Patreon. Patrons of this channel see these videos early and non-monetized, and my top level patrons can join me and play some D&D every month. Today I'd like to recognize these top level patrons: Kurt G, IGW, Loxo Don, Math Guy Dave, Matt, Mouse the Tank, Mikkel Precursor, Nathaniel McCauley, Nick Lutz, and Nick Simmons. Thank you all so much for your support. Let's get started. So let's look at the spell itself. It's a 9th level spell, meaning you need to be at least 17th level to prepare it. It's available to wizards or druids, though a bard could get it through magical secrets. Unfortunately, this is one of those spells that sorcerers and warlocks just can't access. When you cast Shapechange, it takes an action, lasts up to 1 hour, and it requires your concentration, and it affects the caster only. The caster takes the form of a different creature that can be any creature with a challenge rating up to their level. Constructs and undead forms are not allowed, and you need to have seen such a creature at least once. You transform into an average example of the creature without any class levels, and you cannot have the spellcasting trait. The way I read this means that the section on NPCs at the back of the monster manual or similar sources aren't permitted, because those stat blocks are specific examples of creatures. When you take the form of a creature, you replace your statistics with the stat block of the creature. Except with Shapechange, you retain your intelligence, your wisdom, your charisma, as well as all your skill and saving throw proficiencies, in addition to gaining those of the creature. So in this way, Shapechange functions like the Druid's Wild Shape feature. If the creature has legendary or layer actions, you can't use them. Legendary resistance, though, is not a legendary action, so it is fair game. Your hit points and hit dice are replaced by the new forms, and it works just like Polymorph or Wild Shape, so that if you lose all the hit points from the shape change, and so now you have 0 hit points, you revert to your normal form with your own hit points, and if there's any additional damage, it carries over. And just like with Wild Shape, you retain benefit of any features from your class, your race, your feats, as long as your new form is physically capable of using them. The only thing you don't get are any special senses, they're not carried over. Chances are whatever form you transform into is going to have better senses than you anyway. Unlike Wild Shape as well, there's no restriction on spell casting. So, assuming your new form can meet the components of casting a spell that you have, then you can just cast it as if you weren't shape changed. Of course, at high levels as a druid, you're going to be able to cast in Wild Shape as well. You choose whether your equipment is merged with the new form, falls to the ground, or is worn by it. Again, if it's physically possible and practical. Nothing changes about your equipment. So if you're wearing human-sized full plate, for example, and you want to change into a giant, it doesn't become giant-sized. Here's the part that makes Shapechange special. While you're concentrating on the spell, you can use your action to change to a different legal form. Otherwise, the only restriction is that your hit points in the new form never go up. So if the new form would have additional hit points, they instead remain at their current amount. So you can change into a creature with more hit points. You just don't get those additional hit points. There's a 1500 gold piece material component that's not consumed by the spell. So I would assume, in pretty much any campaign where you get to 17th level, you can swing 1500 gold pieces. And if you don't think you can, talk to me. There's a million spells that'll get you that 1500 gold pieces, no problem. So first off, let's deal with the restriction of needing to have seen the creature before. Obviously, any creature you faced in gameplay is automatically going to be available. Also, any creature you've encountered in your backstory should be available, assuming that backstory has been approved by the DM. Also, any creature you may have encountered during downtime presumably also will be available. But what if you want to assume the form of another creature? Well, you're a 17th level wizard, druid, or bard. The scrying spell is the first and most obvious option, since if you scry a creature, you've seen it. Now, what if you don't know where to scry a creature? Well, then you could ask a god using Contact Other Plane where you might find such a creature, or a well-worded divination. The thing is we are a high-level caster, and you can likely see one of these creatures without a quest line as long as you plan for it beforehand. The second thing is the restrictions on spellcasting. Shapechange does not allow the spellcasting trait for a creature form taken, but we can still access new spells, because although the spellcasting trait is not allowed, the innate spellcasting trait is. But remember that you are concentrating on shape change, so we would be looking for spells that don't use concentration. Also, there's a lot of unique features for creatures that kind of emulate spells or have their own spell-like effects, and in general, those never use concentration. And there are a lot of creature statistics that are amazing for a player to take advantage of. In a lot of cases, these features have a certain number of times they can be used, but if you change form to another creature with the same feature, you should get those uses again. So in other words, let's say you turn into a creature with legendary resistances, and normally that's 3 uses. And then you use, say, 2 of those legendary resistances. Noticing your automatic saving throws are running low you use your action to transform into a new creature with legendary resistances. Well, according to the spell, our statistics are now replaced by the statistics of the new creature, which include 3 legendary resistances. So, does that mean we get unlimited everything? Well, we have a 1 hour duration, but within that time frame, yeah, kind of. Or at least that's how the spell is worded. Whether the intent of the designers is different, I can't say, because as to my knowledge, they've never said. But the way I read it, if you turn into a creature with legendary resistance, you can have 3 legendary resistances, and then you can use them up, and then change into another creature with 3 legendary resistances, and you get those resistances. And then once you use them up, you can change again to another creature with legendary resistances, and so on and so on and so on. And this would work the same way with innate spells as well. Though the spell does say that during the spell's duration, you can use your action to assume a different form, which certainly and reasonably, I think, could be read that you can't change into the same specific creature twice during the duration, because that wouldn't be a different form, that would be a form you've already taken. So, in other words, if you turned into an adult white dragon, then you change into something else, anything else, you couldn't turn back into an adult white dragon a second time. But even if you read it that way, there's still no end to the number of forms that we can and will want to take. So first, let's talk about some basic tactics for the spell, then we'll discuss some specific creature shape change options. So first off, this is a concentration spell, and we do not want to lose concentration on this. This is our 9th level spell. Now, hopefully, as a 17th level spellcaster, at least, you've protected your concentration saves through Constitution save proficiency, either through your base class or through Resilient Constitution. And if you have, you keep that in your new form. Or perhaps you have the Warcaster feat, or perhaps Lucky, perhaps class features that allow you bonuses to saving throws, like the Stars Druid Dragon form. All of these would follow you to the new form. And remember, your constitution will change to that of the new creature, which is likely going to be higher than yours. And if for some reason you don't have proficiency in constitution saving throws, if the creature has that proficiency, you're going to get it. But if there is any chance your concentration could be interrupted regardless, choosing creatures with legendary resistance, which can be used on concentration saves, could make your concentration really unbreakable. Now, our shape change could also be ended with a successful Dispel Magic check. Most creatures, and I mean way most creatures, don't have access to Dispel Magic, even the spellcasting creatures. And even if they do, they likely can't upcast it. And they would need to upcast it to 9th level, meaning they would have a DC 19 ability check to dispel the shape change. So I don't think it's likely to be dispelled, but it could happen. So having Counterspell at hand could be very handy in this case, either from you or party members, or preferably even both. And since Counterspell has only a somatic component, any form with hands should be able to cast it as long as you have it. Anti-magic, of course, suppresses shape change, so if you end up in anti-magic, keep concentrating, because if you can escape or remove the anti-magic spell, you can resume your shape change where you left off. We should take note of what the spell says about hit points. You can't use shape change to increase your hit points after the initial casting. So that means there's a tactical advantage to us to take an initial form with a lot of hit points. So, for example, let's say we shape change into a hypothetical creature with 300 hit points. Then maybe we take some damage. Let's say 100 hit points worth of damage overall. So our current hit points falls to 200. This would be a great time to consider switching to a creature that has around a 200 hit point maximum, and so on. The other option is to have specific combat options that have regeneration. So for example, you might switch to a Dire Troll in combat. Then after the combat, wait until you regenerate full hit points before you shape change again. I should also mention the Find Steed and Find Greater Steed spells. Each of these spells create a steed, and while mounted on the steed, and you cast a spell that targets only you, like a shape change spell, they also target the mount. Now, the mount does not have your level, and it has the same restrictions for the spell. And so that means they need to use their own challenge rating as a restriction for forms chosen. But, a Pegasus, which is challenge rating 2, could shape change into the infamously broken Intellect Devourer, for example, getting some pretty crazy features like Devour Intellect and Body Thief. In most cases, I would imagine our character won't have access to Find Steed or Find Greater Steed, unless we're a bard using magical secrets, then I think it's actually quite likely. But there are other ways we might have access to Find Steed or Find Greater Steed, like through a spell tattoo or something like that. When it becomes apparent that an enemy is using a certain kind of energy attack or imposes a certain condition, we can mine immunity to just about anything while Shapechange is active. So let's talk a little bit about what specific forms we might want to access. The Planetar is maybe my favorite option for Shapechange. It's CR16, so it should be available as soon as we get Shapechange. And these first examples I'll use will all be challenge rating 17 or less, meaning that as soon as you get Shapechange, they should all be available. And Planetar meets all the other requirements to be a legal selection. With a constitution of 24, our concentration saves are in good shape. And even if we're not proficient in constitution saving throws, that's still a plus 12 constitution saving throw. We get a fly speed 120. That is really, really high. Much more than dragons. We have damage resistance to most attacks we might take, and we're immune to Charmed, Exhaustion, and Frightened. And if we're a Chronergist wizard, Exhaustion immunity is crazy broken. But for anyone else, it's still some nice immunities. We have True Sight with 120-foot range. This isn't uncommon. There's all kinds of forms we can take with True Sight. And that's normally a 6th level spell on its own. And we have Telepathy with 120 range as well. And according to the wording of the spell, we actually immediately know every language, period. We can also detect lies perfectly. That has utility use, gain magic resistance. And of course, we have a bunch of innate spellcasting options. A lot of them are 5th and 6th level spells. And we get a healing touch. We can use 4 times for a total of about 120 hit points of healing. Nothing wrong though going classic Adult Gold Dragon. This gets you a Fire Breath attack for 12 d10 damage with a save DC of 21. Then we get Frightful Presence, Legendary Resistance, Blind Sight, and just to throw complication on complication, the Change Shape feature. If we don't want to wait for that breath weapon to recharge, we can become an Adult Red Dragon the next turn for another breath. It has the same saving throw, does about the same amount of damage. Oh, and all those creatures that made their save against the Gold Dragon's Frightful Presence, I have some bad news. Make another save. And of course, we get our Legendary Resistance again. A Merilith is an interesting option. A Merilith can take a reaction every turn in combat. And yes, that means you could counterspell every turn as long as you have the slots. Feats like Polar Master or Sentinel become absolutely insane if you can take a reaction every single turn. Because remember, again, your feats carry over. Never mind 7 attacks on their turn. A green Abishai gets Mass Suggestion, a fantastic 6th level spell. We can't use Dominate Person because of the concentration, but Mass Suggestion, no concentration. Then there's the Purple Worm, and this is not unique. There's a couple creatures that get this, but we can leave a 10-foot tunnel when it burrows through solid rock, so huge utility value there. The Elder Brain can sense all creatures within 5 miles with an intelligence of 4 or higher. It has Legendary Resistance, a DC 18 Mind Blast that stuns enemies, doesn't require concentration, and it can establish a telepathic link it can use to completely mind read a target and modify that mind with emotions or ideas that it places there. Ice Devils, they can raise walls of ice. Now, Wall of Ice normally requires concentration, but when an Ice Devil does it, no concentration. A Beholder, of course, has that anti-magic cone. That's huge, anti-magic that we can move around. But also, we get the eye rays, including the super useful Disintegration Ray. And also, we should note that a lot of the other rays mimic concentration spells, but without the concentration. None of them require concentration. For example, we get a telekinetic ray or a charm ray. The Rakshasa is a really interesting selection. It is immune to all spells of 6th level or lower. And just in case you think it's immune to spells that targeted only, here's Jeremy Crawford. Because of the limited magic immunity trait, a Rakshasa could stroll through a wall of stone, presumably through a wall of force too, or any other magical effect. Then we get innate spellcasting of True Seeing. We might as well cast that on someone while we're in this form. And we can plane shift with no material components. Want to cast Mass Suggestion again? Well then, go Ultraloth. Get Mass Suggestion, add on Firestorm, and dispel magic at will. That could be very handy. Now, let's say you want incorporeal movement. Probably thinking, without undead, not a lot of options. There's not a lot of options. But don't let that stop you. We have the Spirit Troll, which is a giant, but it still has the incorporeal movement. Now, you've probably seen Dominate Monster pop up a couple times here, and of course we can't use it because it has concentration. And if that depresses you, then let me introduce you to the Aboleth. They can basically dominate monster without concentration. By the way, if you want to teleport, there are several creatures with innate plane shift. I briefly mentioned the Rakshasa, but there are more options than I care to list. And because it's innate, there is no material component, which means you don't need a tuning fork attuned to the plane you want to go. And that is usually the main restriction of the plane shift spell. So you can go anywhere, and you can bring the whole party along. For quick teleports, all kinds of creatures get one action unlimited teleporting. That's usually self-only with a 120-foot range. Now, if you're 18th level or higher, there are some other tasty options. A Sibriux is challenge rating 18. They get 3 Feeble Mind spells with the DC of 21. That's 3 8th level spells, and that is just one of the forms you might select. And of course, more legendary resistance, and Warp Creature, which is a devastating ability. A Red Abishai, which is CR 19, can use one action to give 4 allies advantage on all their attack rolls, and immunity to Frightened, and that's 1 minute, no concentration. So set it up, use your action, change to something else. Ancient White and Brash Dragons, they both have CR 20. They have 90-foot breath cone weapons. That is massive. A Leviathan can create tidal waves. These are 250 feet long and 250 feet high. Now, there is no way I can provide an exhaustive list, but we can access a tremendous amount of spells, features, and basically any immunity you want. And we can get all these things with a single casting of Shapechange. So when we talk about the amazing versatility of the Wish spell, I think we need to consider that some other 9th level spells can be pretty versatile too, and extremely powerful. And Shapechange, well, it's just cool as well. Switching forms continually for an hour is just something I want to do with any spellcaster. So hopefully you get a chance to access some 9th level spells with your character at some point, and if you do, I hope you'll give Shapechange some serious consideration. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody. Talk to you soon.